in and out of the field of view. That is Nicole Ayers going into the pressurized mating adapter and continuing hatch opening procedures. And she is wearing the long-sleeved navy polo. And the red polo that just flew by, that is Expedition 73 Commander Takuya Onishi. We've also seen glimpses of Anne McLean in the field of view, as well as certainly everybody aboard the International Space Station anxious and excited to welcome Axiom Mission 4 with Commander Peggy Whitson, pilot Shubhanshu Shukla, mission specialist Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski, and the mission specialist Tibor Kapu aboard the orbiting laboratory. This is Mission Control Houston. If you are just joining us, you are following along with live coverage of the docking and soon-to-be hatch opening and welcome remarks of Axiom Mission 4 to the International Space Station. The mission began with the launch off of Launch Complex 39A and NASA's Kennedy Space Center yesterday morning at 1:31 a.m. Central, 2:31 a.m. Eastern. That took them on a journey that was a little more than a day to get them to the orbiting lab. They have since docked, and contact was at 5:31 a.m. Central Time. And after the connections made, the hooks driving to form the hard mate, umbilicals with power and communications connections all run. Now it is those hatch opening procedures and leak checks that the crew is currently working through aboard the International Space Station, while the crew aboard the
on 2 for step 3.2, seeing about 0 for the DVTT, looking for your go to continue.
We see the same. You're good to proceed.
And continued communications as Nicole Ayers once again floating into that pressurized mating adapter and continuing those hatch opening procedures to welcome Axiom Mission 4. The target welcoming remark ceremony time, 8:35 a.m. Central. So a little more than 2 hours from now as leak checks and pressurization checks continue on before the APAS hatch and the vestibule and all procedures can be completed. And a great view of some of those procedures as Nicole Ayers, again, you can see her with that right hand turning the crank and working on that hatch to continue those procedures.
Dragon, station, this is Houston on the big loop for comm checks.
Dragon has you loud and clear. Dragon on the big loop. We have you loud and clear.
And Dragon, we read you the same.
Great communications checks there as the teams on the ground continuing to work on those communications between the International Space Station and the ground, as well as the teams here in Mission Control Houston and Dragon, as we are watching live inside of the International Space Station up into the Node 2 Zenith hatchway as NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers continuing with her hatch opening procedures. Docking of Axiom Mission 4 to the orbiting laboratory occurred about an hour and 10 minutes ago at 5:31 a.m. Central, and since then the crews for both station and inside Dragon have been going through those procedures and making sure everything is as it needs to be, including the proper leak checks and stowage from both perspectives, before continuing on with hatch opening procedures and welcoming remarks. We'll continue to provide updates, and you'll hear calls on the big loop of all four parties: NASA's Mission Control and the International Space Station Flight Control Room, SpaceX in Hawthorne, California, and the teams and the Expedition 73 crew aboard the International Space Station and Axiom Mission 4 aboard the Dragon and Grace
Dragon, Houston on the big loop. Stand by for hardline audio config.
Dragon copies.
Also a part of these procedures, and once hatch opening continues to move along, the crews will install IMV ducting to help mix the air of the space station environment with the air inside of Dragon and seal up some of those lithium hydroxide cartridges that scrub the carbon dioxide inside of the Dragon spacecraft. And that was on their ride to the International Space Station. They'll also check some vent valves as we go, and maybe need a little bit more time on board, but these last final checks are crucial to make sure everything is good to go, since it will remain docked to the International Space Station for nearly 2 weeks. With the arrival of Axiom Mission 4 and the Dragon Grace spacecraft, newly named and given by Peggy Whitson, commander of Axiom Mission 4, shortly after launch yesterday morning, that now brings 5 spacecraft to the International Space Station: 2 Dragon spacecraft, a Soyuz MS-27 spacecraft, and 2 Progress vehicles, cargo vehicles, attached to the orbiting outpost. For Dragon, it is Endurance and Grace, connected to the forward and now Zenith ports of the Harmony module, with 2 Progress vehicles and that Soyuz MS-27 also connected. And once the Axiom Mission 4 crew makes its way aboard station, that'll bring, since 1998, 288 visitors to the orbital outpost. Nicole Ayers, NASA astronaut, has returned to inside the pressurized mating adapter and working on the APAS hatch and hatch opening procedures as we continue to get great
Dragon,
views from
Houston
inside
on the
the
big loop.
International Space
Com
Station.
check. Hardline audio configuration complete, and we have resolved the audio issues on C2P2.
That sounds great because we have you loud and clear.
We read you the same.
And that was a good communications checkout from the teams on the ground up to Dragon Grace on the C2V2 line, common communications for visiting vehicles, and that communications line connecting all parties. As we continue to work through hatch opening procedures, and again targeting approximately 8:35 a.m. Central Time for welcoming remarks as the International Space Station and Expedition 73 crew bring in and welcome aboard Axiom Mission 4. Both the orbiting laboratory and the newly docked SpaceX Dragon spacecraft over the northern Pacific Ocean, about to cross into the west coast of North America, right along the U.S.-Canadian border. And also around that time, we will start seeing an orbital daytime period as Dragon and the International Space Station have been orbiting in a nighttime phasing. Currently experiencing a satellite handover period, and we'll continue to bring you the live views from the International Space Station, both inside or exterior. Once communications is established, which should be here in the next few moments. Till then, you can see on this map where exactly we're talking about, where the station and Dragon orbiting over the Pacific Ocean and about to cross over North America and over the northernmost territories of Canada. As we wait for those communications to return, to recap, Axiom Mission 4 has connected with the International Space Station after launching from NASA's Kennedy Space Center yesterday morning at 1:31 a.m. Central Time to connect with the space station at 5:31 a.m. Central this morning. So a little more than a day's transit, and where it would execute a sequence of burns to raise its altitude and close the distance between Dragon spacecraft, Dragon Grace, and the International Space Station through a phase burn, boost burn, close burn, transfer burn, and then eventually the co-elliptic burn, to make sure that the spacecraft is on the same pathway as the International Space Station and able to make its way up and over top of it to connect to the space-facing port of the Harmony module, the Node 2 Zenith port. As we now get views back inside of the International Space Station, that is the view from the other side. We mentioned the space-facing port that is looking up into where the hatchways will be to allow for the Axiom Mission 4 crew to pass through. and be brought aboard the International Space Station for Peggy Whitson, commander of Axiom Mission 4, her second flight as an Axiom commander after previously serving as commander of Axiom Mission 2. This is her 5th flight and return to the International Space Station, where she continues to build on an impressive career, the most experienced United States astronaut. Entered the mission with 675 days to her credit, and will certainly add to that record-setting total in her time aboard the orbiting laboratory and bringing up pilot Shubhanshu Shukla of ISRO, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski of POLSA, and Tibor Kapu of HUNOR. And for Shukla, Uznański-Wiśniewski, and Kapu, representing India, Poland, and Hungary, respectively, for those nations, it'll be their first time coming to the International Space Station. Nicole Ayers. And the last one into the hatch, I believe that was Anne McLean making her way in as they continue to work through hatch opening procedures. In the middle there, that is Expedition 73 Commander Takuya Onishi of JAXA. And then you just momentarily saw NASA astronaut Johnny Kim float in and out of view as the crew working together to continue these procedures, moving around some equipment, and to allow for the access to the APAS hatch. After successful vestibule pressurization and checks. And that's the operations that Nicole Ayers is working on right now with Takuya Onishi. And Johnny Kim with camera in hand to document these procedures. And again, just on the other side of this hatchway is where the Axiom Mission 4 crew going through procedures of their own, inventory and doffing their suits that they wore on the uphill ride to their initial orbit. And after an off-duty period would put back on for those dynamic phases of flight, starting with the approach initiation burn that occurred earlier this morning. If you are just joining us, good morning from Mission Control in Houston in the International Space Station Flight Control Room as we are looking live inside of the International Space Station as NASA astronauts Nicole Ayers and Anne McLean alongside with Commander of Expedition 73 and JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi going through a hatch opening procedures. And there you can see as the team has worked together to open up that APAS hatch and continue on with those procedures to welcome aboard eventually the Axiom Mission 4 crew with the welcome remarks. Currently still targeting.
The big loop, the APAS hatch is open and no condensation observed on the seals.
Houston copies. Looks great. Thank you.
And a perfect call down right there, as that is the APAS hatch that we were just mentioning that Nicole Ayers and team have opened up and radioing down the status and condition of that hatch with no condensation reported. And as Nicole Ayers continues to work on that hatch, you'll also see that hatch be covered up to give an extra level of safety to allow for the Axiom Mission 4 team to pass smoothly without having to worry about any additional hazards as they pass through the vestibule and pressurized mating adapter and eventually into the Harmony module of the International Space Station. Another step in this hatch opening procedure is the removal of the docking cross, which it looks like that is what Nicole Ayers is working on as we speak. And you sometimes catch glimpses of it on the docking procedures that was exposed to the vacuum of space to help provide targeting for visiting vehicles. But that'll be another step in this hatch opening process, again, to help clear the way for that pass-through between the Dragon SpaceX Grace spacecraft and the International Space Station. Hatch opening procedures continuing to move along for the teams aboard the International Space Station and Axiom Mission 4 as we draw closer and closer to the anticipated hatch opening and eventual welcome remarks. And we thank you for tuning in and joining us this morning as we are live from the International Space Station Flight Control Room in Houston, Texas, monitoring Nicole Ayers as she continues to work through those step-by-step procedures. As the hatchway, there you see the large square structure just off to the right-hand side of our field of view with that window in the middle was
Station
opened up.
Houston on the big loop. Just want to clarify, we want the standoff cross stowed in the standoff cross cover bag.
Houston Station copies.
And that's the teams here on the ground assisting the astronauts on board the station with those hatch opening procedures. As again, that zenith hatchway we were just mentioning before the comms open to the right that allowed Nicole Ayers and team to pass through. And that docking cross that was just removed will be inserted into its own bag. And there is NASA astronaut Ann McLean to join Ayers in the hatchway and continue on with those procedures as they now look to cover up the APAS hatch, which was just opened a few moments ago, to provide an extra layer of safety and protection for astronauts passing through.
SpaceX Dragon, suit drying is complete.
And Dragon, we copy on the big loop, suit drying complete.
Good insight there from the Axiom Mission 4 perspective of their procedures that they are currently going through in anticipation of hatch opening, and welcome remarks as they make their way into the International Space Station after connecting and docking to the International Space Station about an hour and a half ago, 5:31 a.m. Central, 6:31 a.m. Eastern. They went through their procedures, inventory, and stowage, and doffing of their suits that they wore from launch yesterday morning from Cape Canaveral, Florida, and NASA's Kennedy Space Center, and then during the dynamic portions of operations, and are now settling into their flight suits that they will bring in and wear as they cruise into the International Space Station. And that's the view we see from the orbiting laboratory is NASA astronaut Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers working through their procedures for hatch opening. The APAS hatch is open after successful vestibule pressurization and checks. They are now covering up that APAS hatch.
And SpaceX Dragon in step 5 of 2.102. We're waiting your go for hatch open.
Dragon, SpaceX copies on the big loop. You are standing by for hatch opening. We are waiting for hardline connections to be complete. I'll call back with a go.
Okay, thanks. Sorry to rush you.
And there you heard Axiom Mission 4 Commander Peggy Whitson radioing out to the team at SpaceX. They are awaiting the go for hatch opening. I'd imagine the crew aboard the Dragon gray spacecraft anxious and excited to float into the International Space Station for the very first time. And you just saw that orange ductwork or hose-like piece of equipment that Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers were just operating with. That's a part of helping mix the air between the International Space Station and the Dragon spacecraft. They'll continue to check some vent valves as well, so it just might be a little bit more time before we welcome the crew on board. But these final checks, again, critical to making sure that everything is good and sealed tight with no leaks and no issues, as Dragon Grace will be docked to the International Space Station for approximately the next 2 weeks.
Houston, SpaceX station is ready for Dragon hatch equalization.
Houston, copy. Stand by.
Another step in those hatch opening procedures is Nicole Ayers just radioed down for the SpaceX Dragon hatch pressurization and equalization. As you see the pop of flash bulbs aboard the International Space Station being documented, and plenty of smiles from the Expedition 73 crew as we draw closer and closer to hatch opening and welcoming Axiom Mission 4 aboard the orbital outpost. Meanwhile, here on the ground inside NASA's Mission Control, the International Space Station Flight Control Room, anticipation also building up as the room starting to fill with NASA leadership as well as the Athena flight team continuing to work through the hatch opening procedures. Flight Director Allison Bollinger closely monitoring every step of the way as Nicole Ayers is continuing to work through each checkpoint on her list. That's what you saw on the little tablet that she was referring to, making sure every step is covered as she has now floated back into the pressurized mating adapter across the APAS hatch.
Station Houston on the big loop. We're still working some ground config actions before we're ready for equalization. In the meantime, can we get confirmation that the standoff cross went into the standoff cross bag? We were unable to tell from the video.
It was in there when you guys called. Thanks.
Copy, thanks.
Hearing communications from teams on the ground as they continue to work through hatch opening procedures and making sure all pressurization and leak checks are good and everything equal between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station before the hatches can be formally opened on both sides. You can see into this hatchway the space-facing port, or into the space-facing side of the Harmony module aboard the International Space Station and the International Docking Adapter that welcomed the connection of Axiom Mission 4 at 5:31 a.m. Central Time earlier this morning. And since then, the crews aboard both the Dragon Gray spacecraft and International Space Station have been diligently working and continue to monitor the progress of that hatch opening with teams on the ground also following suit.
Station Dragon Houston on the big loop. Stand by for equalization. Expected to take 1 minute.
Station copies 1 minute.
Dragon copies 1 minute.
Great communications there from all teams here at NASA's Johnson Space Center and International Space Station Mission Control Room, teams in the SpaceX in Hawthorne, California, and everyone aboard the Dragon SpaceX Grace in Axiom Mission 4 and the International Space Station as we continue to march towards the hatch opening to welcome Axiom Mission 4 aboard the orbiting laboratory.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, you are go for hatch opening per the decal, followed by the remaining actions in procedure 4.400, section 6.
Dragon copies. Go for hatch open and remainder of steps in 4.400.
We are go for hatch opening is what you have just heard. If you are just now joining us, you are tuned into live coverage of the arrival of Axiom Mission 4, the International Space Station.
And SpaceX Dragon, hatch is coming open.
SpaceX copies.
Expedition 73 crew anxiously awaiting as we just received the go for hatch opening to welcome Axiom Mission 4 into the International Space Station. There you see Ann McLean in the foreground working on the tablet, alongside with Johnny Kim on the far right-hand side, NASA astronaut, and then Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov next to him, with Alexei Zubritsky and Sergei Ryzhikov, also of Roscosmos, in that mix. And right there in the middle, almost standing, if you will, from our perspective, is Expedition 73 Commander and JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi. From this view, they are looking up.
SpaceX Dragon, hatch is open at 12:14, and we're requesting the go for the LIO change.
Copy 12:14 Zulu hatch opening time, and you are go for LIO swap.
And there you heard that the hatch is open and confirmed at 7:14 a.m. Central Time, as the hatches are open between SpaceX Dragon Grace spacecraft and the International Space Station. Again, 7:14 a.m. Central, 8:14 a.m. Eastern. And you heard also the swaps of the LIO canisters. That's the lithium hydroxide cartridges that scrub the carbon dioxide inside of the Dragon spacecraft on the ride to the International Space Station. Also, Nicole Ayers out of view, but if from this perspective, looking up, she is operating with the Axiom Mission 4 team to help refresh the air and cycle air between the two craft as they continue a few more procedures before floating across and into the orbiting laboratory for the first time.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop for LIO cartridge.
Go ahead for LIO cartridge.
Just looking for clarification on your next action there. We're tracking LIO cartridge sealing per 2.102 step 6.5.
Oh, okay. And in my procedure, I had for the instructions on the decal for section. For section 4 of the instructions on the decal.
And copy that, Peggy. We'll defer to the instructions in 2.102.
Okay, that's where we are.
You just heard communications between Axiom Mission 4 Commander Peggy Whitson and the teams on the ground as they were talking about the swapping of the lithium hydroxide cartridges as the hatch has been opened between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station just a few moments ago at 7:14 a.m. Central Time. And this is a view inside the International Space Station, looking forward, if you will, as the astronauts and cosmonauts aboard are looking up. That is towards the space-facing port of the Harmony module. That's where they are in now. If you were to keep going forward, if you will, that is the forward port, which currently is occupied by Dragon Endurance from Crew 10. And a great microgravity demonstration of the camera that Alexei Zubritsky is using to help document and be a part of the welcoming committee for Axiom Mission 4 here in the next few moments.
Dragon, Houston on the big loop. Just to confirm, we want to make sure IMV duct installation is complete before we do LIO cartridge sealing.
Yes, the IMV duct installation is complete. My bad, I didn't get it reported.
Houston copies.
Now we switch views from pretty much the point of view of what the astronauts have been looking at. From what we have seen, they were looking up, and this is the shot up into that node to zenith hatchway of the Harmony module. That is Nicole Ayers, NASA astronaut, just on the other side of that APAS hatchway, working with the Axiom Mission 4 crew. You heard them talking about IMV ducting and LIO cartridges. That IMV ducting helps mix the air of the International Space Station environment with the air inside of Dragon. And then also looking to seal up some of those lithium hydroxide cartridges that are used to scrub carbon dioxide from the air in the spacecraft on their journey to the International Space Station. And that journey started yesterday morning, 1:31 a.m. Central Time, 2:31 a.m. Eastern, as they would launch on the SpaceX Dragon, newly named Grace spacecraft, on a Falcon 9 rocket from Launch Pad 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, and would chase down the International Space Station earlier this morning at 5:31, nearly 2 hours ago. 5:31 a.m. Central, 6:31 a.m. Eastern, a little bit more of a day's transit.
Houston and SpaceX Dragon arrival configuration is complete.
Houston copies.
SpaceX copies.
Continuing to target a welcome ceremony or welcome remarks in the near future at 8:35 a.m. Central Time. So a little bit more than an hour from now is Axiom Mission 4 and the International Space Station continuing to work through hatch opening procedures, but getting close, you can start to see a little bit of a window of opportunity that was just on the other side of astronaut Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers there as they are working on IMV ducting, mixing the air of the station and Dragon, and lithium hydroxide cartridges, stowage and swapping out. So Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers are starting to clear out the hatchway, and we are going to see the first views of Axiom Mission 4. Commander Peggy Whitson, the first one across the A-Pass hatch, receiving great big hugs from Nicole Ayers and the Expedition 73 crew. Axiom Mission 4, welcome aboard the International Space Station. Pilot Shubhanshu Shukla is the next one to come across, representing ISRO. It is his first space flight for Peggy Whitson, her return to the International Space Station on her 5th flight, second as a member of Axiom Space. Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski of ESA, representing the nation of Poland. And their first visit to the International Space Station is next to cross the hatchway. And warm hugs all around. And applause breaking out here inside of Mission Control Houston and International Space Station Flight Control Room. And Tibor Kapu, the fourth and final member of Axiom Mission 4, representing Hunor and the nation of Hungary. Their first visit to the International Space Station as well. Great big hugs and handshakes across all members of Expedition 73 and Axiom Mission 4 is Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers of NASA, along with Johnny Kim, Kirill Peskov, Sergei Ryzhikov, and Alexei Zabritsky of Roscosmos, and Takuya Onishi, commander of Expedition 73 and of JAXA, with handshakes and hugs for Peggy Whitson, Shubhanshu Shukla, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski, and Tibor Kapu. And with their arrival to the International Space Station, that now makes 288 visitors to the orbiting laboratory. Axiom Mission 4 is now aboard the International Space Station. Commander Peggy Whitson in her return to the orbiting laboratory, her 5th flight. 3 is a member of NASA, and her 2nd as commander of Axiom, an Axiom Space private astronaut mission, commander of Axiom 2 and here of Axiom 4. Regaling the crew with smiles and stories. To her left, or our left from her viewpoint, to her right, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski of ESA, Shubhanshu Shukla to her left of ISRO, and Tibor Kapu on that far right-hand side of our viewpoint. The crew is safely aboard the International Space Station. Welcome again to Axiom Mission 4. And we are continuing to target a formal welcome remark from the crew and being joined by the Expedition 73 team as well. That'll be at approximately 8:35 a.m. Central Time. And from there, they will receive a safety briefing and begin their nearly approximately 2-week mission aboard the International Space Station, in which they will participate in around 60 research investigations representing 31 countries, with more than 24 of those experiments sponsored by the ISS National Lab. And there they all are, waving back at our coverage here inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Room.
Station Houston on 2. Thanks for the wave. Great to see everybody.
Houston Station, we're happy to be here. It's so great to be here finally. It was a long quarantine.
And with the crew now in the space station, we're going to wrap up our portion of the live joint coverage from Hawthorne. It's been an honor to support Axiom Mission 4 thus far, and we wish the crew a successful time on the space station. We're, of course, also looking forward to joining Ax-4 again when it's time to return home.
Ronnie, from launch to docking, it has been an absolute pleasure sharing this desk with you. What has been years in the making for India, Poland, and Hungary is now well underway. Axiom Space and NASA's joint coverage will continue from here through to the welcome ceremony as Peggy, Shubhanshu, Sławosz, and Tibor start their 2 weeks aboard the orbiting laboratory. Over the course of our crew's time on station, we will be producing mission updates from Axiom Space's own space station development facility in Houston, Texas. So we invite you to follow the progress of Ax-4 on axiomspace.com and through Axiom Space's social media channels.
So with that, on behalf of SpaceX, Axiom Space, and NASA, thank you all for tuning in to watch. While our stream on X is coming to a close, coverage of the welcome ceremony now continues on NASA Plus, axiom.space/live, and Axiom Space's social channels. With that, we'll turn it back over to you, Joseph. Have a great morning, everyone, and go Ax-4.
Go Ax-4.
Thank you very much, Paul and Ronnie, and thank you for joining us on this morning's broadcast as we continue on with our live coverage of the arrival of Axiom Mission 4 to the International Space Station, the fourth private astronaut mission to arrive to the orbital outpost and the first since January of 2024. We just saw the crew of 4, including Commander Peggy Whitson, Shubhanshu Shukla, pilot of ISRO, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski, and Tibor Kapu of ESA and HUNORT, respectively, crossed the hatchway and into the orbital outpost for the very first time. We're continuing to follow along as we'll wait for the formal welcoming remarks that are currently scheduled for roughly 8:35 a.m. Central Time, so a little bit more than an hour to go as the crew continues to settle in. After you heard the remarks from Peggy Whitson mentioning the long quarantine, the ride up, which took a little bit more than a day's time to do so, as the teams here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room and special guests in the viewing room at the back of your screen on hand to witness this special moment and also to be a part of a handover period as the Orbit 1 team wrapping up their day's work, which certainly was busy. That saw the multiple burns as the Dragon spacecraft named Grace would continue its transit to catch up to the International Space Station, and ultimately docking at 5:31 a.m. Central Time with that initial contact. The soft capture turned to hard capture and mating. Hatch opening procedures took about 2 hours or so to complete, with teams on both sides inside the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station meticulously checking for leaks and going through each procedure step by step before that moment we just had a couple moments ago at 7:14 a.m. Central Time, in which the hatch was opened and the astronauts of Axiom Mission 4 floated on through to the International Space Station. We're currently experiencing a transition in communications satellites. That's nominal and to be expected, so we will bring you back those views inside the International Space Station once we have them. But again, the teams here inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Orbit 1 team wrapping up a great day's of work, or great morning's work, that saw 4 new members join the orbital outpost to bring up the attendance to now 11. This is Mission Control Houston as we continue our live coverage of the arrival and docking of Axiom Mission 4 to the International Space Station that occurred a little more than 2 hours ago as the team lifted off from NASA's Kennedy Space Center and Historic Launch Complex 39A yesterday morning at 1:31 a.m. Central Time to begin its little more than a day transit to the orbiting laboratory. And just a moment ago, the hatches were opened, and welcoming in Peggy Whitson, commander of Axiom Mission 4, Shubhanshu Shukla, pilot representing ISRO, and the nation of India, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski of ESA, and the nation of Poland, and Tibor Kapu of Hunor, as they have joined the crew aboard the International Space Station, and we will bring you those views as soon as we have them, as we are currently transitioning between communications satellites. We are targeting a formal welcome remark and ceremony coming up at 8:35 a.m. Central Time, in which the team on board the International Space Station will go through the proper voice and audio checks and visuals to perform that ceremony. Earlier in the broadcast, Axiom Commander Michael Lopez Alegria, former NASA astronaut, talked about what can be expected during that ceremony, including a pinning ceremony that Commander Peggy Whitson will perform for the newest members to go into low Earth orbit, and first-time flyers in Shukla, Uznański-Wiśniewski, and Kapu. And for those 3 representing India, Poland, and Hungary, they also represent the first visitors from those nations to the orbiting laboratory. You're currently seeing live views inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Room as the teams on the ground here in Houston are currently undertaking a handover period over at Orbit 1 team that had the early morning hours and monitored Dragon's approach and docking. We'll hand over to the Orbit 2 team, which will then take over for their shift of the day. Flight Director Allison Bollinger and her Athena flight team, that Orbit 1 team, undergoing the handover period as they will transition to the Orbit 2 squad, as we'll continue to follow along with live commentary and updates leading into the welcome ceremony and opening remarks on the arrival of Axiom Mission 4. Flight Director Vincent Lacourt and his Destiny flight team, the next on tap in this handover period. And there you see him in the foreground, setting up next to Allison Bollinger, Flight Director that just completed her shift, welcoming Axiom Mission 4 and her Athena flight team as they continue their handover period. And as both teams monitoring the progress and preparation for the upcoming event, the welcome remarks from Axiom Mission 4 and their formal arrival to the International Space Station. And plenty of smiles and laughter throughout the room after a successful docking that occurred about 2 hours and change from now. And that was at 5:31 a.m. Central Time, in which the Dragon Grace spacecraft, soft capture, then hard capture, connected to the International Space Station and its space-facing port on the Harmony module. Hooks connected to form the hard mate, and then over the next 2 hours would begin the procedures to pressurize the vestibule, the gap between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. That was at vacuum. They wanted to bring the atmospheric pressure equal to that of what's inside Dragon and the space station, which is relative to here on Earth, which is equal to about 14 psi, which is sea level. And once that was able to be accomplished, the APAS hatch on the space station end was open. Shortly there followed by the pressurization and opening of the Dragon hatch. And that would occur at 7:14 a.m. Central Time. And now the crew is aboard the International Space Station, settling in after a little more than a day's transit to the orbiting laboratory. And we look forward to hearing from them here shortly for welcome remarks. And again, tracking around 8:35 a.m. Central. This is Mission Control Houston as we continue our coverage of the arrival and docking and soon to be welcome remarks of Axiom Mission 4 as they have locked up and synced up with the International Space Station earlier this morning. And the crew of 4 have since floated aboard the International Space Station, bringing up its population from the Expedition 73 crew of 7 to now a total of 11. And we will hear from Commander Peggy Whitson, pilot Shubhanshu Shukla, mission specialist Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski, and mission specialist Tibor Kapu here shortly. We are continuing a handover period. The Orbit 1 team, the Athena flight led by Flight Director Allison Bullinger, handing over to Vincent McCourt, and the Destiny flight team. That'll be completed here in just a few moments. Meanwhile, the crew aboard the International Space Station continuing to get settled in and prepare for those welcoming remarks that would be a little less than an hour from now, about 50 minutes or so. The Axiom Mission 4 team that just arrived and entered the International Space Station shortly after the opening remarks will settle in and recover, and soon to get to work, as they will participate in around 60 science investigations representing 31 countries, and more than 24 of those experiments sponsored by the ISS National Lab. They'll also participate in a wealth of outreach activities that they will participate during their approximately 2-week mission. Starting with Axiom Mission 1 and now through Axiom Mission 4, the International Space Station has now welcomed 14 private astronaut crew members representing 11 different nations aboard the International Space Station, showcasing how private astronaut missions expand access to low Earth orbit, commercial space, and the space station, and bring that access for more nations, people, and opportunities. The views you are seeing now are from the external cameras on board the International Space Station, looking at the Dragon spacecraft as the vehicles now enter an orbital nighttime period. The two currently traversing across the southern Indian Ocean and about to cross the continent of Australia and make its way over into the Pacific Ocean. Formal handover underway here inside of the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA Johnson Space Center. As the teams on the ground, Orbit 1 team, Allison Bollinger, Flight Director, in her Athena flight, handing over to Vincent LaCourte and the Destiny flight team, who will take over and continue to monitor the progress of the arrival of Axiom Mission 4, who are aboard the International Space Station, hatch opening between the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft named Grace, in which that hatch would open up at 7:14 a.m. Central Time, and the crew of 4, Peggy Whitson, Shubhanshu Shukla, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski, and Tibor Kapu, welcomed with smiles, photos, handshakes, and hugs from the 7-member Expedition 73 crew that feature NASA astronaut Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, along with Johnny Kim, JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi, Kirill Peskov, Sergei Ryzhikov, and Alexei Zubritsky of Roscosmos. she would lead the charge. It'll be commander of Axiom Mission 4, Peggy. In history, began this mission with 600 and proceed for the evening, and then hitting the ground running tomorrow. And for the Axiom Mission 4 team, that would be day one of Uznański-Wiśniewski at including the newly arrived Axiom Mission 4, as everyone.
Okay, this Houston, this is station. I can give you 5 counts. 1.
Talk, we heard you, but just lost the video downlink, so please give us a minute. Talk, oh, there you go. Thanks, Shuk and Johnny, for checking the cables there. And Talk, if you could give us one more 5 count. We missed it on the last one because we lost video downlink.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That was a good scene and voice check, and we'll be ready to begin after the handover.
Great communications between the team on the ground and everyone on board the International Space Station, including the newly arrived Axiom Mission 4, as everyone getting staged and set up for the welcome remarks that'll get underway here in about 4 minutes' time. There will be an anticipated loss of signal, though briefly, and then we will bring everything back on board, and the welcome remarks in which Expedition 73 will welcome their 4 new friends aboard the orbiting laboratory, and we'll turn it over to the team from there. And again, we are experiencing a temporary loss of communications, but the acquisition of signal should be in just a couple of seconds. And once the video is on board, the welcome remarks for Axiom Mission 4 will get underway.
Station. This is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston Station, we are ready for the event.
Please begin the welcome ceremony.
All right. Grace crew, welcome aboard the International Space Station. On behalf of Expedition 73 crew, I would like to make a couple of opening remarks. First of all, Peggy, welcome back.
Thank you.
It's a great honor and privilege to have such a legendary astronaut like you on board with us. And Tibor, Shukla, and Sław, congratulations on your first space flight. And we've been waiting for you guys so long, and we are so happy to see your all smiling faces. And with your arrival, right now there are 11 astronauts from 6 countries, and all of us are here in order to advance human space exploration and scientific research. Symbolizing international cooperation. So from this moment, you are also a part of Expedition 73. And once again, welcome aboard. And I will pass the microphone to Axiom 4 Commander Peggy Whitson.
Thank you so much, Tak, and for the 73 crew as well. We appreciate being invited in. You guys are exceptional hosts, and hopefully you'll think we're exceptional guests at the end of a couple of weeks. But we're looking forward to getting a lot of work done with you guys, and I really appreciate all the support you've provided to us in advance of actually even getting here. I think that's very unique and special about you. And the best part about being a commander on a mission with all rookies is you get to watch the rookies go through it for the first time. And it helps you remember some of the things you went through the first time. But it also, it's just very special to get to relive the experience again through these guys. And so I'd like to give these guys their astronaut pins. So we'll start with Shubhanshu Shukla, astronaut number 634.
Well,
Yeah, I'll go ahead and get these out.
Thank you, Peggy. Oh, so I am number 634. That's a privilege. No, but to be fair, it is a privilege to be amongst the few who have got the chance to see the Earth from a vantage point that I have been able to see now. It has been a wonderful ride. It has been great, and I was looking forward to come to space. It is something to look forward to as such. But the minute I entered the International Space Station and you guys, this crew, you just made me feel so welcome, as if you literally opened your doors, like your house doors for us. That's true. So, but it was fantastic. I feel even better. Whatever expectation I had of coming here, they were surpassed by the view. Of course, that's the big part of it, but by you guys as well. So thank you so much. I think this was fantastic. This is wonderful, and I'm very, very confident that the next 14 days are going to be amazing. Doing, as you said, advancing science and research and working together. Thank you so much.
And number 635, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski. Go for it.
Thank you, Peggy. And thank you all for such a warm welcome to the International Space Station. Expedition 73, 11 people. I remember this moment from our training that we met already once before, all of us. in Houston, and now we are meeting up here on the International Space Station. So this is such a tremendous place. For me as an engineer and a scientist, this is an ultimate scientific laboratory where we come to do science, to test our technologies of our countries, to do technology demonstrators and science outreach that I can't wait to do for the next 2 weeks. And we will all try to do the best representing our countries. I represent Poland for the first time on the International Space Station, as well as ESA, not for the first time. So ESA had, as an international partner, had a lot of missions to the ISS, but Poland, this is for the first time. So thank you for having us, and we are very honored to be here among you. As you said, 6 nationalities. We bring 3 extra ones, and we can't wait to spend this time together. Thank you.
And last but not least, number 636, Tibor Kapu. I just needed practice. It got easier.
I was an easier guy. All right. So, thank you very much, guys, for this really, really warm welcome. I really feel that this is the best crew that we could join to. It really feels great to be a part of Expedition 73. As Tak, the commander, said that we have so many countries in the same time in the space station, but we also have 7 out of 11 who are complete new flyers, which also tells me how much space is expanding towards a new era. One of my friends told me 2 days ago when I was asking him what should I tell in space, what should be my speeches about, and he said that if there's ever a time for speaking from the heart, then this is it. And my heart is so full right now because of you guys and because of seeing Earth for the first time. There is a lot to choose from. So I'm extremely happy to be here, happy to represent my country. On our ride up, we actually saw our countries flying above those. It's truly, truly a special feeling. Looking forward for these 2 weeks. I'm 100% sure that this is going to be awesome. Thank you.
और एक छोटा सा संदेश मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों के लिए, आपके प्यार और आशीर्वाद से सुरक्षित मैं इंटरनेशनल स्पेस स्टेशन पे पहुंच चुका हूं। और बहुत आसान दिख रहा है यहाँ खड़े होना, लेकिन थोड़ा सा मुश्किल है, थोड़ा सा सर भारी है, थोड़ी तकलीफ हो रही है, लेकिन ये सब बहुत छोटी चीज़ें हैं और कुछ ही दिनों में हम इसके यूज्ड टू हो जाएंगे। और ये पहला पड़ाव है इस जर्नी का, और अभी आगे 14 दिन यहाँ पे रह के हम काफ़ी सारे साइंस एक्सपेरिमेंट्स करेंगे, आप लोगों से बातचीत करेंगे। लेकिन कहीं ना कहीं ये जो पड़ाव है ये भी दिखाता है कि ये हमारी अपनी स्पेस जर्नी का भी एक पड़ाव है। तो मैंने बात की थी आपसे कुछ देर पहले जब मैं ड्रैगन में था, और अभी यहाँ से आगे भी बात करता रहूँगा। चलिए इस जर्नी को बहुत एक्साइटिंग बनाते हैं, बहुत उत्साह से इसमें पार्टिसिपेट करते हैं। मैं बहुत उत्साहित हूँ और मैं अपने शोल्डर पे अपना तिरंगा जो मैं लेके चल रहा हूँ, मैं मानता हूँ कि आप सब मेरे साथ हैं, तो मैं ये भी समझ लेता हूँ कि आप सब भी मेरे साथ उत्साहित हैं। और मुझे लगता है कि अगले 14 दिन बहुत ही एक्साइटिंग जाने वाले हैं। धन्यवाद। जय हिंद, जय भारत।
Thank you, Shuks. Drodzy Polacy, drogie Polki, cieszę się, że mogę tutaj Was powitać z pokładu Międzynarodowej Stacji Kosmicznej. Po raz pierwszy jesteśmy na stacji, po raz pierwszy mamy polską misję na Międzynarodową Stację Kosmiczną i bardzo się cieszę, że mogę reprezentować właśnie Was, 40 milionów Polaków, którzy mają możliwość obejrzenia misji, ale jednocześnie kontrybuowania do części naukowej, technologicznej i wykonywania eksperymentów na Międzynarodowej Stacji Kosmicznej. Będziemy prowadzić również lekcje fizyki dla dzieci w szkół, dla studentów i mam nadzieję, że to jest początek Polski technologicznej, obrazu Polski na świecie właśnie w takich miejscach jak Międzynarodowa Stacja Kosmiczna czy najbardziej zaawansowane laboratoria technologiczne. Bardzo dziękuję Wam za zaufanie. Tak jak już wcześniej mówiłem, kosmos jednoczy. Jesteśmy tutaj razem, jesteśmy silni i budujemy naszą przyszłość. Dziękuję bardzo za zaufanie i do zobaczenia przez najbliższe 2 tygodnie. And over to Tibor.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. There's always a first time for anything, right? Üdvözlök mindenkit a világűrből. Ha jól számolok, akkor 2009 óta először hangzanak el magyar szavak innen. A nemzetközi űrállomás fedezetéről. Charles Simonyi után, aki kétszer is járt itt, én álltak a következő, aki magyarul beszél ezen falak között. Hatalmas megtiszteltetés és elképesztő büszkeség számomra. Alig 30 órája se vagyunk a világűrben, de már volt alkalmam beszélni a szüleimmel egy pár perce, akik elmondták azt, hogy az ő szemükkel mit láttak a Földről, amikor mi elhagytuk azt, és már látjuk, hogy micsoda hatása lesz annak a küldetésnek, és amikor azt mondom, hogy küldetés, az nem véletlen. Nekünk ezzel a pár következő nappal, héttel valóban egy küldetésünk van. Nem csak egy tudományos küldetésről beszélünk, nem csak kísérleteket fogunk elvégezni, egy inspirációs jelleggel is vagyunk itt. Szeretném megmutatni azt, hogy még egy ilyen kis nemzetnek is sikerült egy ekkora hatalmas dolgot végrehajtania. Én vallom azt, hogy kis nemzetek tudnak a legnagyobbat támadni. Szeretném megköszönni mindenkinek azt, hogy lehetővé tette ezt a küldetést, lehetővé tette ezt az elmúlt pár órát és a következő napokat. Még egyszer csak azt tudom mondani, hogy rendkívül hálás és büszke vagyok, hogy magyarként itt lehetek.
Well, thank you again. Thank you again for welcoming us so openly and warmly. We really, really appreciate all of you and all of the team on the ground as well. Thank you.
Okay, Houston Station, that concludes our event.
Thank you to all participants. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications. Thank you to all participants. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.